Why is this so controversial? And I have to say, I have been thinking long and hard about this topic starting from, let's say, the day after my study was published. So this is why I think it's controversial. So currently there is a public debate, there is clinical debate, and I believe people are basically arguing from the positions of two conceptual models for gender dysphoria. And so I'm going to talk right now about a developmental model for gender dysphoria and an innate gender identity model, which you might call gender theory, you might call a gender affirmative model. So from a developmental model, gender dysphoria is may develop in the context of different kinds of cognitive, psychological, social, relationship processes. And the context is important because what you would do to help that patient is different. So for example, someone may become gender dysphoric because they are a young boy who is being bullied for liking ballet dancing, or a teenager who is discovering that she is same-sex attracted and having difficulty accepting herself as lesbian. Gender dysphoria might emerge after the trauma of a rape, and gender dysphoria might emerge in the absence of all of those things. And so the context is important because you would not treat somebody who develops gender dysphoria right after being raped the same way as you would somebody who's had gender dysphoria without any issues. So this is really viewed, gender dysphoria, as something that can have multiple causes, multiple treatments. Now, we don't have clear-cut causes, but just, I'm speaking conceptually. So context is important. Psychological issues, if they coexist with gender dysphoria, could possibly be underlying conditions for gender dysphoria. And I'm talking about the developmental model of gender dysphoria. From the developmental perspective, the desistance research is acknowledged within the strengths and limitations of the research. And as you would imagine, approaches really employ a thorough evaluation. So approaches that are consistent with the developmental model are a developmentally informed biopsychosocial approach, a systems approach, an exploratory approach. And these employ thorough evaluation and a judicious use of medical and surgical transition. So in contrast, there is the innate gender identity model. And this is more of a one cause, one treatment belief. So in this model, it's believed that there is an entity called a gender identity that represents a person's true self. And this gender identity may either match or not match one's biological body. And this is the source of gender dysphoria. And the treatment for this is transition. And because this is more simplified, the context is really not important. Psychological issues are thought not to be underlying conditions. And I'm just going to point out that's really more in practice than what's written. So the way it's written is that psychological issues are unlikely to be underlying or so, if you're thinking about psychological issues, the direction of, you can think that gender dysphoria might cause psychological issues, such as from discrimination and poor treatment, or that psychological issues may be completely unrelated, or you can conceptualize psychological issues as underlying. And so in practice, the suggestion of underlying conditions is often met with hostility and calls that's transphobic. So this is the more extreme version. The desistance research in the innate gender identity model is rejected. And these approaches are approaches that have minimal or even absent evaluation and liberal use of transition. So the informed consent model requires no mental health evaluation before accessing transition. And this is for individuals 18 and older. And it's popular in the United States right now. And I do need to point out that the gender identity affirmative approach, there are people having a debate within this about what is the role of the evaluation, because recently Three very prominent members of WPATH have spoken out and saying that they are concerned about the lack of evaluation because there is a trend of clinicians bypassing or considering that the affirmative model means that individuals don't need an evaluation. So, in other words, to say it more succinctly, the priorities for a developmental model are making the correct diagnosis and providing the correct treatment. And from the innate gender identity model, the priority really is quick access to transition. And people in both of these models believe that what they're doing is helping people, but you can understand why there would be a clash of priorities, because the folks from the innate gender identity model will view developmental model as being an unnecessary delay to transition. Transition is believed to be the answer, and delay is seen as harmful. Coming from the developmental model, there is concern that this quick access to transition is failing to diagnose important conditions and providing the wrong treatment to some individuals.